Today we're going to learn to make plushies. To make a plushie, you're going to want to decide what shape it needs to be. So I made a bunch of these stencils with different pictures on them, and you can choose one and trace it onto your fabric to make your plushie. What you will need: a stencil, the one that you chose, at least one piece of fabric, a Sharpie or marker, scissors, a needle and maybe a paper to help you thread your needle, some yarn. I'm going to use some scrap fabric in mine. And you will also need some stuffing and a hoop. The first thing you will do is put your stencil on your fabric, and then with a marker you're going to draw around the outside of your stencil, but not right against it, because you need what is called seam allowance, which is a little bit of area that you're leaving just to sew on. So notice I'm leaving just about 1/4 of an inch around each side as I draw. You are going to want to trace your shape twice, one for the front and one for the back. Now I'm going to sew the details onto the owl. So I'm going to take the hoop and put it on my fabric. Now I need to do the belly and the wings, but the hoop, I don't want it right at the edge. So I'm going to just scoot it over a little bit, remembering that it's not centered in my fabric and that my belly and wings need to be centered on the shape. That should work right there. Don't forget to turn the little screw to make sure it's nice and tight and so your fabric doesn't fall out when you're sewing. Here's where I'm going to use some of my scrap fabric, because I only need a tiny circle for this green belly I want on my owl. I can just trace it right onto my fabric and then cut it out. It doesn't make sense to use a whole full sheet for such a small shape, so please use the scraps. Now I'm going to sew this green belly into place. I got some green string so it matches, and I'm going to use my nifty threading needle trick of folding a long skinny piece of paper and using my paper to pull the string through the hole. I'm going to bring the ends together and tie a knot so it doesn't come out of the hole. I want my knot to be nice and big, so maybe a double knot. And then it's time to start sewing. Okay, I know this little circle needs to be in the middle of the owl, so I'm checking with my drawing and making sure it's in the right spot. Once I have it where I like it, I'm going to push the needle through the fabric and through my little circle to sew it into place. This is kind of difficult because that little green circle is going to want to move around a lot. And I really have to hold it there to make sure it goes through the needle. My first stitch went from the bottom up, and then I'm going to take my string and go from the top down. I'm going to continue sewing bottom up and then top down all the way around this circle, holding it in place while I'm sewing it. You really have to be able to use both your hands at the same time to do this project. The first stitch is going to be the hardest, and then after that it's really easy because that green fabric doesn't want to move around anymore. So just go ahead and sew all the way around the shape you're trying to attach. And when you get to the end, tie your knot on the back. This is how I tie a knot. I take my needle and I go through a stitch that I already sewed, leaving a little bit loose. Then I take my needle and I go through that loose area twice from the same direction, and then I pull tight. Then you just cut off your extra string. Now I'm going to do that process all over again, this time with pink fabric for my wings. It's the same thing. I cut out the shape and then I sew it into place and tie my knot in the back. For my eyes and my nose, I decided to just do needlepoint, which is when I just add the color by sewing it on, because I had some really nice orange string to use for that, and I used brown string for the eyes. It looks pretty cute when it's all done. After you've finished adding your details, you can take it off the hoop, and then you're going to want to cut out the two shapes that you've traced. One for the front and one for the back. We know that the back one doesn't have to be decorated. Now that my two shapes are cut out, it's time to sew them together the same way I would a pillow. I turn them inside out with the good side facing in, and then I use my needle and thread to sew a whip stitch around the edges. A whip stitch is when I'm always putting the needle in from the same direction. That way the string whips around the edge of the fabric and goes back the same direction. This holds the fabric in better. So for my whip stitch, I'm going from the back to the front, from the back to the front, from the back to the front, and my string wraps around the edge. I'm going to do that all the way around my stuffy. I chose to start sewing at the bottom, so that way my last stitches are also at the bottom, and any knots or shown stitches are less visible because they're not in the important part, which is the top. Make your way all the way around your plushie until you have just a small opening left where you will turn your plushie inside out and insert all the stuffing. These steps are the same as when you make a pillow. Flip it inside out or right side out so that your good side is showing. Don't forget to stick your fingers in any corners because those don't like to turn inside out as easily. And then you're going to take your stuffing and you're going to stuff it all in. After your stuffing is in, you're going to continue with your whip stitch, which is when you're going from the same direction and the string whips around the edge until you have the hole all sewn up. Then you will tie a knot and you're finished. I tie a knot the same way I did with the string on the back. I leave a loop and put my string through it from the same direction twice. And this is my double knot to be doubly safe. After it's tied, I cut the string off. And there it is. So cute.